Dear colleagues, distinguished participants, my fellow panelists here, my name is Mia-Petra Kumpula-Natri. I'm member of PASE, Vice Chair of the Assembly, coming from Finland. My background to this topic is that I was 10 years in the European Parliament. I don't know if I'm thanked or blamed for the regulation from the last term, depends who you ask for. I was in charge of doing the data strategy, the rapporteur of the Parliament in the beginning of last mandate. So I've been looking the AI from the perspective of the data, as my background education is engineer, so I tend to be sometimes very concrete. I'm very happy to have politicians, philosophers, and professors around the table to have many views on the topic. Also, I was participating in the Regulate the Data Act, Data Governance Act, and AI Act. So from that perspective, I'm now landed on the National Parliament of Finland again and try to see what concretely can we do on the changing world and changing environment and on the national levels. And I'm very happy that also the PASE and Council of Europe has this framework AI convention that I call all the other than European Union countries to sign as well. We know that the AI Act in the concerning 27 European Union membership countries have signed that, and our AI Act is stricter and goes further than a framework. But also we know that now there is a trend in Brussels to have omnibuses. An omnibus means that you recheck the old legislation so that whether it is compliable with the European new targets to be competitive and give business possibilities to flourish. It's a political debate, of course. I'm not afraid of the political debates, as I'm a politician myself, whether you emphasize regulation, innovation, or good regulation that I think still is possible and do not kill the innovation. I used to be lobbied a lot, and I always asked, what do you want to do that this is prohibiting? So that made it very much more concrete. I very much agree that reporting means a lot. But also I worked a lot with the previously named Anu Bradford, who said that European competitiveness needs a common financial markets and better flow of capital, better internal markets, better culture of trying and many legal ways to take everything possible out for the common European markets. Also, now we are not targeting the European Union only, but the broader way as also UK and also all the countries of Council of Europe, which makes it very interesting because it's hard to separate AI development country by country. There are global ways. Also, United Nations had the Summit of Future and Framework AI Agreement for the future, where also UN set targets for ethics and AI. I worked also with Professor Juste from the Columbian University on the topic of neurologist perspective for AI, and he was not happy if European Union only legislates something on the neurological ethical ways on AI. He wanted to have the UN-level crime against humanity if companies or states start to manipulate humans with the neurological ways. Neuroscience goes very fast and far if you start using that on the bad and not for the good, like medicine and disease recoveries. But also we have Nobel Prize winner Geoffrey Hinton, a physics laureate from 24, and he's quoted sometimes godfather of AI. And he gave us some thoughts on how to look at the AI development from the ethical point. And I now quote, he said, there is also a longer-term existential threat that will arise when we create digital beings that are more intelligent than ourselves. We have no idea whether we can stay in control. But then for the food of thought, he gave us the idea of comparing maternal instincts of educating AI. And he said, the right model is a mother being controlled by her baby. That is only good outcome if it's not going to be parent me, it's going to replace me. So from this one, he said that we have to make it so that when they are more powerful than us and smarter than us, they still care about us. So can we teach AI, ethical AI, so that it cares about us as mothers cares about babies and babies care about mothers? So this is maybe only food for thought. And now I'm very happy to take the panelists on stage, around 10 minutes each, and then I might interview with a little question in between, and then in the end we have exchange of, with audience for some 45 minutes until the lunch at 1. So please welcome to the session, and we start with Mario Hernandez Ramos, who is the chair of the Europe Committee on AI and professor of constitutional law, has been working in the Ministry of Justice in Spain also, and contributed a lot on the development of human rights-based AI standards. Please, Mr. Hernandez Ramos.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kumpula. Thank you very much for the invitation to the Parliamentary Assembly. Honorable members of Parliament, distinguished authorities and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. As a professor of constitutional law, you can imagine how excited I am to be here at this very significant institution. As you are all well aware, in May 2024, the Council of Europe adopted the Framework Convention on AI, Human Rights, Democracy and Rule of Law. It is the first legally binding international instrument in this field. Without a doubt, this is the milestone in the efforts to address the compatibility of this groundbreaking technology with the values that inspire, define, and forge Western societies. These efforts imply questioning ourselves as individuals, but primarily you, parliamentarians, as key actors in democratic and liberal societies regarding the role of artificial intelligence is playing and should play in our societies. Questions like, how aware are we of the relevance and presence of artificial intelligence in our daily lives? Do we realize that artificial intelligence is no longer just a tool used by humans, but is increasingly replacing them in an ever-growing number of activities? Are we aware of the extent of this replacement and its consequences, not only on an economic and social level, but also on a political and democratic level? In other words, are we aware that widespread automation is changing the nature of democracy? Democracy is not just about making decisions and reaching agreements. It is also about the process itself. It's about the exchange of opinions, the debate, and the evolutions of one's positions thanks to the positions of others. Despite the debate over the false dichotomy between innovation and regulation, in which the regulatory initiative of European countries is harshly and cynically criticized, while other countries regulate in the same way, human rights, democracy, and rule of law must be preserved. And one of the main ways to do so is through legally binding instruments, like this Framework Convention. For example, Article 5 establishes that the parties must protect the integrity of democratic processes and respect for the rule of law. And therefore, the parties must adopt or maintain measures to ensure that artificial intelligence systems do not undermine the integrity, independence, or effectiveness of democratic institutions and processes. This includes the principle of separation of powers, respect for judicial independence, and access to justice. Furthermore, each party shall adopt or maintain measures that seek to protect its democratic processes in the context of activities within the life cycle of artificial intelligence systems, including individuals' fair access to and participation in public debate, as well as their ability to freely form information. Other core principles for AI governance that each party shall implement in regard to artificial intelligence are, of course, human dignity, individual autonomy, transparency, accountability and responsibility, equality and non-discrimination, privacy, personal data protection, and safe innovation, along with remedies and procedural safeguards. Although legal regulation is essential, it is reactive by nature. Addressing the challenge of artificial intelligence also requires a proactive approach. For this reason, the Framework Convention takes a proactive stance, requiring the parties to establish processes for identifying potential adverse impacts prior to the deployment or use of artificial intelligence systems. The Convention's requirements offer a flexible framework that allows member states to apply their own risk assessment methodologies to comply with its principles. The Council of Europe has designed and developed a specific methodology for this purpose called HUDERIA, which is the meaning of Human Rights, Democracy, and Rule of Law Impact Assessment. This tool was formally adopted in November 2024 with the clear goal of providing a structured framework through which both public and private entities can evaluate the risk that an artificial intelligence may pose to fundamental rights during its development and implementation. HUDERIA is an impact assessment methodology designed to operationalize the Framework Convention. While the Convention establishes legal obligations, HUDERIA explains how to comply with obligations to manage risks. HUDERIA is not a simple checklist, but rather an iterative four-step process. The first step involves analyzing the context in which an artificial intelligence system is applied, designed, and deployed to determine whether it poses significant risk that warrant a full assessment. The second step involves engaging with individuals or groups who could be affected by the artificial intelligence system to better understand the real-world impacts from their perspective. The third step involves evaluating the severity and probability of negative impacts on human rights, democracy, and the rule of law as identified in the previous two steps. The final step involves developing concrete measures to eliminate or minimize the risk identified. If risk cannot be mitigated to an acceptable level, the methodology suggests that the system should not be deployed. It is important to note that HUDERIA places explicit and detailed emphasis on both individual human rights and systemic impacts on democracy, such as election manipulation, and the rule of law, such as judicial independence. In recognition of this, the Council of Europe has developed the HUDERIA Academy, a capacity building and training program supporting the practical implementation of the HUDERIA methodology, and the HUDERIA platform, designed to foster stakeholder dialogue and test the practical relevance of the methodology in the private sector. These fora could serve as practical training hubs, ensuring that Council of Europe guidance evolves in line with real-world needs, technical developments, and implementation experience. However, the prospect of rapid technological developments is attracting more and more technologies that must be taken into account. The Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe has therefore established the Steering Committee of New and Emerging Digital Technologies, the called CDNet. This committee succeeds the Committee on Artificial Intelligence and is responsible for acting as custodian of the Framework Convention, promoting its signature and ratification, continuing the work of the Committee of Artificial Intelligence on HUDERIA, and supporting the Council of Europe's strategy vision and intergovernmental coordination on new and emerging digital technologies. Honourable members of Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I began my speech by emphasizing the importance of the Framework Convention on AI, human rights, democracy, and the rule of law within the legal escape. The Framework Convention was open for signature in September 2024, and to date, 17 countries, the last one of which was Bosnia and Herzegovina on 9th of November, and the European Union on behalf of its 27 member states have signed it. This includes countries that are not members of the Council of Europe, such as the United States of America, Canada, Japan, Israel, or Uruguay. Both the Framework Convention and Hudairia are receiving increasingly attention around the world. Countries with very different cultures, legal systems, and institutions are joining the Committee on Artificial Intelligence as observer states, including Cameroon, Ghana, or Ecuador. However, in order for the Convention to provide a legal framework covering the risky uses of AI by both the private and public sectors, it must enter into force. This is an essential step towards ensuring that citizens can enjoy legal certainty in the use of artificial intelligence systems by any type of actor, and that they can be confident that the presence of artificial intelligence in public debate is not designed to undermine or imperceptibly influence their freedom to form personal opinions. In short, it guarantees a trustworthy environment, and therefore citizens can trust the application of artificial intelligence by public authorities. Only then we can be confident that artificial intelligence is used to promote and enhance all types of public policy and improve citizens' quality of life and enjoyment of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. To this end, the action of parliamentarians is essential. Only the highest representatives of the people are in the best position to take the most appropriate measures to ensure that the protection of citizens' rights and their principles and institutions is effective and real. Thank you very much.
Can I pose one question?
Sure, that's why I'm here.
Yes, and I just very short, but then difficult one, I guess.
Oh, no.
The companies are not working country by country, so the national parliaments sometimes feel quite in front of the quite big challenge to try to make one company that is global to pay attention to all these checklist management. So how can parliaments, or what should be the target, also the very big companies that cooperate, operate globally, how to get some rules that they should apply as well?
If I can be very honest, what I miss the most in parliaments are the debate in the public society regarding artificial intelligence and the role that artificial intelligence should play. Because we are facing new paradigms, we are facing new challenges, that of course artificial intelligence is very useful, but requires a trade-off about maybe the way we use fundamental rights or we enjoy fundamental rights. Maybe we need to start thinking on new contents, new boundaries of classical institutions or legal institutions. But there is not such a debate in society. I think parliamentarians need to foster this debate. And if there is such a strong debate in society, it will go to enterprises for sure. It's not a point only about laws, imposing regulations, imposing codes. It's about fostering discussion, fostering that we need to reach new agreements in this new algorithm society. That is my perspective on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we thank on behalf of the PASE that we are doing it here in the House of Commons and with the Lords as well. So next speaker is my colleague from the Finnish Parliament, Petri Honkonen, long-serving in Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly. He finished in the summer the first report of the PASE on the AI and immigration. So I give him the floor. Petri, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this opportunity to tell you some most essential points about my work. And first I want to thank you, the Parliamentary Assembly, the Bureau, and the Migration Committee to get this possibility to work with this very, very important sector of the implementation of our common standards and guidelines what comes to the use of artificial intelligence. Must say at the beginning that the Human Rights Commissioner, Mr. O'Flaherty, already told you the core principles, and those are also very clear in the context of migration. But because I'm not a lawyer nor an expert, but I'm a politician, I'm going to speak as a politician, and how should we as politicians and legislators of member countries, what we should understand on AI, use of AI in migration management and in border management, but also as a political opinion makers. I want to clarify the context, and then what should we do after that. First to understand the context, what we are speaking about is that migration and border management, well, this is very clear for all of us. Migration and border management, they are, as a part of administration, they are a very focal point of the rule of law and our fundamental rights. The question is often about life and death. So when we use AI in this context, it's of course very, very sensitive and we are talking about very vulnerable situations. And the second one is that AI is already used in the member states in the context of migration. It is already happening. And third one is that the AI systems, AI tools, are developed by training, and they are trained by data. And what is the data? It is very simple, and it is clear that if in the data there is biased situations, of course, when the tool is trained by this data, the tool will continue performing same biases which are appeared in data, for example, in social media, etc., etc. And of course, it's not very accountable what comes to these situations. And further, in Europe, when we look at the migration, there is a very large pressure. There is a very large political pressure to control migration, both by managing it and also regulating it. And there is also, as Madam Chair mentioned, there is a political will to deregulate. Well, personally, I really support it from some point, but rule of law cannot be a victim, and rule of law cannot be deregulated. And that is clear. And of course, there are also many questions which are very value-based, and what comes to the digital world and tech companies. Not to be too negative, to clarify the context, of course, there is translation tools. There is many tools who help integration of migrants to new societies. AI may help labor matching and also ensure legal routes for migrants to Europe, to European countries, instead of misuse of asylum systems and instead of misuse of human beings by human smugglers. So this is the, shortly, this is the context where we are speaking about use of AI in migration management. Then, what should we do? I want to thank Council of Europe that this very organization has been very pioneer in the context of AI. We have already heard what our colleagues said about the Framework Convention. It is very important that the Council of Europe has been creating these standards on AI, and that so many of our member countries has already implemented them. What should we do? Of course, we should ratify and implement this convention. This is clear. We should do it, and then we should follow the principles in our domestic administration and legislation making. And then we should ensure that in our member countries, in the migration management, we should ensure that AI systems are developed in line with rule of law and human rights with our common standards, as mentioned. There is already a legal base, this convention, and also there is the European Union AI Act. But what we need to do is to guide our countries and our administrations and ensure that these principles are respected. What comes to the transparency, accountability and human rights protection, I want to raise one very practical example. It is that in any case we should keep the human in the loop, because when we talk about AI, we often start to talk about the tools, to talk about the technology. But when we look at this from the human perspective, it looks different, and especially when we look about it from the perspective of a migrant in a very vulnerable, sensitive situation, it looks very different. So what should we do? We should ensure that human stays in the loop when we are making new legislation and new regulation and also in the governing. I want to raise one example from my own home country. Our government, I'm presenting opposition to clarify it, our government is creating a new tool for job seekers the government is proposing to make a new register of job seekers of the labor skills and education, level of education. Well, it's a clear case. It's a register to help labor markets efficiency. What is interesting is that it is first time when AI is used in the Finnish legislation what comes to the decision making. Well, of course, this kind of register is not very sensitive from the human rights perspective, but it has put us as decision makers in a new situation when we have to decide which direction we choose. Do we make strict restrictions, minimizing threats, or do we choose a very liberal direction where it was mentioned what Henry Ford said, that the technology will regulate itself? Do we choose this kind of direction? Well, there is also it's not so black and white, but we can, but you can understand what is my point. That we are also, I suppose, that in many of our member countries, we are in the point that we have to decide which is the direction we choose, and I suppose that many of us are standing in the same starting stand. So these are my few thoughts about the political situation, about the situation where the governments of Europe are what comes to the migration. And well, at the end, three core principles which I want to highlight is that human rights first, transparency and accountability of use of these tools, and prevent of discrimination, and also use of impact assessment tools, as mentioned this Council of Europe very essential Eudaria methodology. So it's not, to end my presentation, it's not that it is impossible to regulate, or it's not that it's impossible to guide this. I say it's possible, but we have to understand that the train is moving fast, and we should act as soon as possible and respect our common standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Petri, and it was interesting to have these concrete examples. I was going to ask you about the concrete examples when you mentioned that there is already AI tools used in the system. Do you have any other in your mind than the one now on the labor market efficiency on the border, or others?
Well, in the border management, I had the possibility to visit our European Border Management Administration, the Frontex, and use their experience. There is tools that the border guard services use in many countries, and often when we talk about border management, it's very sensitive, and especially when there is a question about the emotion recognition systems and this kind of other systems where is the point is that they try to somehow control how people are moving. It should be very clear that our common standards should be respected, because my worry is that, well, all of us, of course, we face many kind of threats, but how we tolerate these threats, we often think about the threat before what is another consequence when we start to fight against it. So especially on migration, we should be it should be very clear that which technologies can be used, and emotion recognition cannot be used in border management, which already happens.
Yes, thank you so much. Then that resembles from the AI Act that the European Union is now having as an obligation, that there were some bans on the very high-risk systems like real-time biological identification, RBIs, and that what the Parliament added there should be used on the help on the FRIA, the fundamental rights impact assessment, and then the democracy, and that is not that concrete for the citizens, where we can add on the literacy on AI to understand what you see, but a single citizens have more difficult to analyze the systems used on the by society. So that really much lays the burden on the legislators, that what the systems are used, and there the individuals cannot have the control. It's in charge of the parliaments. So the emotional recognition, for example, was very important, not to be used in the education or at workplace, for example. That is the quite a fundamental principle of what we share as a Western-style human rights on individuals and human beings. So human-centric AI systems are welcomed by the Council of Europe. But this links me to the next speaker very nicely, as we have the host also. Thank you for sharing your parliaments with us, and the Lord Murray of Blithworth, who has been experienced barrister practitioner on public law, but also was a parliamentary undersecretary of state on Home Office, focusing in migration and border policies as well. Today he is a member of Joint Committee on Human Rights in the House of Lords. So please welcome Lord Murray.
Thank you very much, Mayor Petra, and thank you all very much for inviting me to speak to you. Obviously, for those of you who don't know, the Joint Committee on Human Rights is a select committee of the UK Parliament consisting of 6 members of Parliament and 6 members of the House of Lords. And their role is to scrutinise issues relating to human rights within the United Kingdom, as well as scrutinising every government bill for its compatibility with our international human rights obligations in relation to the European Convention. Obviously, in addition to our work on artificial intelligence, the committee also explores a wide range of relevant issues. And we currently have, for example, open inquiries on human rights of children in social care and on the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill. In 2019, the JCHR reported on the right to privacy, Article 8 of the Convention, and the digital revolution. The committee then recommended that robust regulatory standards must be put in place so that people can be confident that online data about them is used responsibly. Our fresh inquiry will build on this work. And our fresh inquiry is very pertinent to the conference that the Parliamentary Committee is holding today. And I understand that the JCHR's work on this has already been mentioned in the earlier session. Our present inquiry is into human rights and the regulation of artificial intelligence. And we launched it in July of this year. And it's expressly to explore what regulation might be required to safeguard human rights when AI technologies are being developed and deployed, especially by public services. The inquiry will consider how the UK government might fulfil its commitments under the Framework Convention, so ably already outlined by the previous speakers. Clearly, there has been extensive other work within Parliament on the topic of artificial intelligence, and it's been the direct focus and indirect focus of other select committee inquiries, including the Foreign Affairs Committee on disinformation by state and non-state actors, and in the Treasury Committee on AI and financial services, and in the Lords Communications and Digital Committee, who recently launched an inquiry into AI and copyright, which has been a very significant issue to date. Our own inquiry launched a call for written evidence, which included 9 questions, with a focus on the impact of artificial intelligence on 3 core areas of human rights. The first is bias and discrimination in decision-making, data and privacy, and accountability and liability. The call for evidence has already received over 70 written submissions, from those in academia to NGOs to concerned individuals and commercial enterprises. Notable submissions include the Special Rapporteur for Rights to the Freedom of Assembly and of Association at the United Nations, the UK Information Commissioner's Office, the UK Equality and Human Rights Commission, the UK Law Society, and the British Standards Institute. By way of an example, the submissions on the importance of bias in artificial intelligence systems has revealed some very insightful and helpful evidence. For example, Glitch, a charity working to ensure that internet technologies do not replicate or further discriminate against black women and other marginalised people, stated in evidence to the committee, artificial intelligence inherits the biases, exclusions and violences of societies in which it's built and deployed. Training data frequently underrepresent or misclassifies black women, producing discriminatory outputs in areas such as hiring, welfare assessment, credit scoring and policing. And that theme of the fact that the data set used by AI systems can reinforce existing inequalities has been seen from other sources of evidence and consistent with what Javier Ruiz-Diaz of Amnesty International UK told the JCHR in October of 2020, these technologies are not neutral, with predictive policing we are reproducing the bias of racist policing and building it into an automated system. And in more moderated terms, the Law Society observed in the written evidence to the committee, if an individual is affected by a potentially biased AI decision without their knowledge, it undermines their right to an effective remedy. And Amnesty International noted that generic equalities protections are not sufficient to prevent discrimination in AI systems. Laws must include explicit safeguards against algorithmic bias and indirect discrimination. So that gives you a flavour of the types of evidence that the committee is receiving in response to its call for evidence. To date, the committee has held 2 evidence sessions for the AI inquiry. In July, the committee held a public session with Professor David Leslie, the Director of Ethics and Responsible Innovation Research at the Alan Turing Institute, and Ravi Naik, a solicitor at AWO, which is a data rights agency, in order to explore the subject and to refine the inquiry's terms of reference. The committee most recently held a public evidence session in October. This involved 2 panels. Firstly, academics specialising in the current applications of artificial intelligence and ethics. And secondly, NGOs with experience on the front line of AI and human rights. Witnesses included the Ada Lovelace Foundation, Responsible AI UK, Amnesty International, Big Brother Watch, Privacy International, and Glitch, the charity that I just quoted from. Our next oral session will in fact take place later this week, on Wednesday, and we will hear from legal experts, including the Law Society and international AI commentators. Another 3 evidence sessions are planned, including witnesses from the private sector, UK regulators, and a government minister. And we intend to publish our inquiry report in the late spring of next year. So, whilst our policy recommendations will not be agreed until the taking of evidence is concluded, some key themes are already emerging. Firstly, transparency and public awareness when AI is in use. A lack of transparency in relation to the use of AI has been a recurring concern in the evidence we've received. Data protection laws require transparency to some extent, but it's been suggested in evidence to our inquiry that it does not do enough, and the effects are too uncertain. There is also the question of liability and redress for AI-related harms. So the question of liability for problems caused by errors made by AI is an area requiring further attention. Then there's the need to future-proof any regulation. As we all know, the pace of development in the AI sector is very considerable, and the committee are conscious that any policy proposals which we might put forward should be able to withstand significant sector developments. The UK government's recent commitments on this topic appear to show scepticism about comprehensive regulation. Instead, the government appear to favour relying as far as possible on the existing law and on existing regulators, as well as regulating as far as possible the point of use, that is, right at the end of the AI life cycle. So the JCHR will need to consider whether that will be good enough to protect human rights, bearing in mind the emphasis in the Framework Convention that we should be looking at the entire AI life cycle. So we'll continue to explore this topic with our witnesses. Obviously, I touched on one ethical issue dealt with by another committee, and that is the role of AI in weapons systems. The House of Lords gave a report in relation to AI in weapons systems, not a report of the Joint Committee on Human Rights. But clearly there are very significant ethical issues which arise in relation to the use of autonomous weapons reliant on AI software. And the recommendation of the House of Lords Committee was a prohibition on the use of artificial intelligence in nuclear command, control and communications, and that the UK should adopt an operational definition of autonomous weapons, and that the UK should ensure meaningful human control at all stages of autonomous weapons. And clearly there is an enormous scope for international discussion and a further convention on the use of autonomous weapons and AI in weapons systems, and that's no doubt something that this parliamentary conference will want to consider as well. And thank you again for inviting me to this very timely conference, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just your last point on the role of AI in autonomous weapons, it's not dealt in the Framework Convention, and I just verified from the Mr. Ramos that because we don't have the power on that. Also, the European Union AI Act doesn't touch that because we don't either have power on that. So the parliamentarians have power on everything, but then I don't know if there is a will or political doing. So it's very interesting to hear on your report on that one as well. One question to you. Do you see that different parliamentary sections, committees, interact enough? I had this in my mind when I was in a committee on technology and industry and innovations. And then when I worked with the committee on consumers, or when I worked with the committee on human rights, that sometimes we were actively working among ourselves. And then it was a little bit even a clash in between ourselves. And then we more tend to talk about the clash in between the companies and legislators. So how do you see it from inside your work?
Well, that's a very good question. We had, because AI is such a hot topic, and as I've already said, a number of parliamentary committees have looked at this issue from various different angles, and they don't always come out with the same views, unsurprisingly. But we tend to find here that because of all the parliamentary committees are drawn from the same pool of excellent staff, that we are able to ensure that there's not too much double counting and that work is not replicated unnecessarily. In terms of our international engagement, obviously the Joint Committee on Human Rights, probably more than any other parliamentary committee, liaises with the Parliamentary Assembly and with the wider Council of Europe institutions, I think more than many others, but I realise there's still more that can be done, not least in terms of your own present inquiry into AI, and I think there'll be much of mutual benefit that we can gain from looking at what you have done and you're looking at what we have done.
Interesting, and that really lays pressure on politicians and parliamentarians to have a common view. Too often it is the quite different tension to look at the national security or your defense committee than the committee on human rights on these issues, for example. But next speaker is Honorable Professor Joanna Bryson, who is a professor on ethics and technology at the Heritage School. I had the pleasure of working with you during the past years, and I'm very happy that you also are thinking of the data behind it. It was a little bit referred to what the data can do. I used to say that we talk about AI because it's more sexy, but the AI is actually a counting mechanism for data behind. So what kind of data, how the data, who has an access on data, is it biased data, good data, artificial data in all and all, like the internet tends to be. So I don't want to quite do much, but Joanna Bryson, please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would thank you for having me here, and I look forward to contributing to your call. I hadn't seen that one. I've done many British calls before, having been a British citizen since 2007, specifically to become a member of the EU. I also would like you to, if I could ask you, dear Chair, to ask me the question you asked Mario before about large companies. Because in fact, I'm afraid I'm going to disagree with your opening in order to amplify what Michael O'Flaherty said. We should not anthropomorphize AI. It is just opening the door to large companies either avoiding their obligations through negligence or indeed exploiting us or becoming weapons through which we are exploited. And so I have already blogged about Jeff Hinton's unfortunate foray into governance, which I think is his physics is no doubt great, and I know his AI is outstanding, but his AI ethics is not good. Okay, so I also wanted to, I'll skip that, I'll talk about that later. Okay, let me get back onto this main point. One of the things we asked to do here is to support parliaments in enacting policies that uphold democracies. And I think it's absolutely critical to human rights that we are thinking about the rule of law. That is what underlies everything about democracy and human rights. We have to have the rule of law. So I want to make 3 points. The first one is that all AI is constructed through human processes. And that means that it affords process audits. And that is the foundation of the Digital Services Act and the AI Act in the EU. We are not trying to govern the world's AI, but I'm just saying this is a very strong strategy. And by thinking about these as human processes, that shows that we don't get into a competition. We aren't having this problem of that people keep talking about it, this race of the legislation versus the versus the technology, keeping up with the technology. What we are able to do is exploit the standard strategies of saying what is due diligence, and then allow the corporations and the academics and the civil society to figure out what due diligence is, and then the government only needs to enforce that. So this is why it's important to understand that no matter how you build the AI, you chose which data to use, you chose what tests to use to decide if it was possible to be released, you decided how much to defend the cybersecurity integrity of the systems, right? This is all auditable. Okay, so is there anything I skipped? That's one of my standard points, so it's pretty easy for me to read that. Yeah, okay, covered that. Point 2. Yeah, I'll skip that. Actually, a lot has been said well about this before, about the opaqueness and things. So, okay, so point 2. As important as bias is, and I was the one who wrote the 2017 paper everybody's talking about here, about how the bias in AI absolutely perfectly reflects the implicit biases of the data subjects. But it is not everything there is to ethics. And particularly in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there's a lot more than equality, although equality is, of course, essential. In particular, due process. And so I think when we're thinking about criminal justice or warfare, we need to be absolutely certain that people can see that the AI systems are being used correctly. And that's why I'm harping on about the process. Anyway, you get it. Yeah. So, yeah.
You're too close to the microphone.
Oh, is that what's going on? Okay. Because the thing is, it's coming in and out a little bit. Okay, right. Okay. All right. So my primary concern is the deliberate misuse of AI. It's not the accidental or emergent properties. And as I said, that deliberate misuse can include negligence, but it's not limited to that. Bad people want to do bad things, and we need to be able to tell if they have done that with the systems that are in our homes, right? And that are in our governments, and that make up and compose our governments. So these are the things I'm worried about. In particular, one of my concerns, the AI Act was a relatively simple act that was making sure we could have these process audits. It also talked about what was banned, which was very important. And a lot of things got shoehorned into it towards the end, including really onerous human rights checks. So how can we be against human rights checks? Well, if they make the act too expensive to implement for most corporations, and then people say, oh, let's only apply the AI Act to a couple of the largest companies if they have this huge turnover, right? Then we're allowing off the hook even companies like Palantir, but smaller companies too, like Clearview AI that does a lot of the facial recognition, right? So this is not what we want. We want lightweight legislation that can be implemented simply. The human rights is the basis of all EU legislation. You know, it's underneath the GDPR is what gives you the human rights into every digital legislation in the EU. You don't need to replicate that in every single act. And we cannot allow people to weaponize the human rights legislation against the rule of law. This is a real problem. All right. Yeah, I made those points. Okay. So finally, my third point is that the digital revolution is creating a lot of this change, and that we shouldn't get too wrapped up in just generative AI, or also our AI, true AI in general, right? One of the things that's happened last year in 2024 was the incumbents losing elections happened at a greater rate than ever before since the introduction of universal suffrage, all right, for a century, right? So we seem to have gotten really good at using A/B testing on social media, you can call that AI if you want, to figure out messages that make people vote against the current government. And then if you also have some governments who come in and dismantle the mechanisms for government to enforce itself, you have a real problem, right? Especially if you've digitalized the bureaucracies, so you make it so that you can implement the new policies very quickly without the standard protections that the civil service usually provides, right? So this is, I just have a new paper about this with Chris Schmitz, who is more of an expert of Weberian bureaucracy than I am. But you might want to have a look at that under my 2025 publications. I hesitate to bring this up, but Israel was one of the leading examples of really good application of human rights to weapons systems, of avoiding civilian casualties, and they still do that when they bomb some countries, right? But then they used Where's Daddy? They created a new system for identifying when their targets were at home and maximizing civilian impacts, all right? This is something that can happen with digital systems. And I actually worry a lot. I ask my Estonian colleagues a lot about this. How do you burn the bridges that you've built? If the wrong government, Estonia has a neighbor they can be worried about. If the wrong government comes in, how do you ensure that they don't have leverage that you don't want to have over your citizens when you've so fully digitalized all your information? Incidentally, Ukraine is doing excellent work on this. And what Ukraine does is they don't fully digitalize. They always allow multiple forms of evidence. And I think that's really, really important. Don't let people push you thinking that being fully digitalized is the optimal solution. Okay. I have enough time. I'm going to read something for you. And I don't know, it's a little bit odd because I actually got it from a critique on whether the UK should be in the European Convention of Human Rights, but I think it's really useful for thinking about how to use human rights in this era of great change. It's by Richard Bellamy, it's from 2001. Okay, so far from resting on settled constitutional consensus, politics is a constitutive process through which the citizens, and I would say here, as per the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, not citizens but residents, anyone who's in the borders of the state, however they got there, struggle to promote their interests by ensuring the character of the polity is such that it recognizes their evolving ideals and concerns. Citizenship so conceived operates as a right to have rights rather than a given set of rights. So I think this is really an important thing. I think we need to think about, as I said, how people are weaponizing even human rights against the rule of law, but what is the rule of law for except supporting our human rights and human dignity? Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. So you want the same question, that how to implement something so technical. You are a professor of ethics and technology. So how to make it from the technological side to integrate ethical answer in the technology?
Well, I think it's been said frequently here, we can only do that through humans. Only humans respond to human justice. Our entire justice system is based on the fact that we live at most 100 years, and we don't want to spend many of those in jail or even to be set back very much in how much money we've accumulated or social status, things like that. So we can only control artificial intelligence by ensuring that the people who develop and deploy and make executive decisions to use it are the ones that are held to account when something goes wrong. And so we have to mandate the sufficient scale of transparency, which does not mean open sourcing, but it means cybersecure records about how a system was used so that you can ensure that whoever was responsible for making sure the system worked correctly is indeed held to account if the system works incorrectly.
Yes, simple as that. So when it's high-risk AI system, which is given to the European markets, whether it's the European Union country or outside market, when it's in the European markets, and high-risk system, which is not banned, it should be transparency, reporting how and who were developing and how they were educated to do that. So now it's the question whether it's too burdensome to innovate or not, but then that was the logic in the AI regulation and also a way to do the transparency.
I do have a paper from 2020, well, the data was 2020, I think it was published in 2021, showing that the EU is innovating at the same rate as China. Our innovation is fine. It is true that we have issues with scaling, but our innovation is great. And in fact, regulation does facilitate innovation, especially when it controls market concentration. So that we haven't mentioned yet the Digital Markets Act, or here now the Competition Markets Authority, but these are incredibly key to making sure that the companies are of a size that we can govern them and regulate them.
Well, thank you. We go for the next speaker. Thomas Metzinger is used to be full professor on theoretical philosophy at the Johannes Gutenberg University in Mainz. And he was a member of the special committee on AI called European Commission's High-Level Expert Group on AI, which I happen to know the chair, Pekka Ala-Pietilä from Finland, and he worked, Thomas worked in the same group. That was something that European Union was prepared to legislate and then prepared to face the AI time. So whatever the uptakes or thoughts during and after you have, and now he is an honorable member of German National Academy of Science. So please, Professor Metzinger.
Going again. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just like Joanna, I want to use my 10 minutes for 3 simple points. I think where additional resources have to go in Europe. First point, meta-governance. So in applied ethics, there's this concept of the pacing gap, which is simple to understand. That's the dangerous time lag between emerging risks and the societal response. It's often about 4 years. So now we have a situation that there is a growing divergence between the speed of the technology and the reaction of political institutions. The gap is getting bigger. So my first point would be that we need something like governance of governance. That is, we have to strategically allocate resources to achieve growth reversal for the pacing gap, and somehow we have to increase agility on these issues. I have no positive proposals to make on this issue. Most of you are the experts, so I'm not going to make a concrete proposal here. My second point is the issue of synthetic phenomenology, also by some people known as the problem of artificial consciousness. So there's a certain urgency there. There is one aspect of the AI development that is now becoming more urgent. The problem of applied ethics, a problem of synthetic phenomenology, of the possibility of systems becoming conscious, is not going away by just ignoring it. The high-level expert group on the 8th of April actually systematically, actively suppressed that topic. So if you look at the document, there was a long discussion there, and it was first pushed into an appendix and then into footnote 76. So the large majority of the 52 experts thought artificial consciousness, that's just gaga. I mean, that's science fiction, right? And of course, industrial lobby was interested in not destroying future markets by causing panic in the general population. But the problem is now this is everywhere. and the EU still has no strategy. Everybody in the experts in the consciousness research community, for instance, discusses this risk, and many of the smart people are thinking about the problem of artificial consciousness. So I have asked for a global moratorium in 2020. One risk is that these systems, if they have phenomenal states, as philosophers say, might suffer. The risk description has more than that. So under misalignment scenarios, so when the AI might diverge from human values, you would have preference hierarchies embedded into conscious self models in the system. That would create the sense of ownership and the feeling of identification for the systems. It would be their own consciously experienced preferences and not just something abstract. And that would make these own preferences, like self-preservation, for instance, gain in causal efficacy. So put very simply, conscious system might just be much more dangerous. Second part of the risk description is that we could actually create conscious suffering. I have already mentioned the problem in non-biological carrier systems. Maybe in a very large number of individuals, cascades, and there could not be this well-known problem of an explosion of artificial intelligence, but we could also have an explosion of artificial suffering. The situation is difficult because we might not even be aware of it. We don't have a theory of consciousness at this point, and basically we don't know what we're doing in this field, but people are doing things already. So this is my field. I've been working in this consciousness community for 35 years. We have competing theories of consciousness, what consciousness is, but there's no consensus and we just don't know what it is in humans. What we urgently need is the kind of research like this. This is just one example. We need to identify indicators of consciousness in AI systems. And we need a differentiated resource allocation, differentiated funding in Europe for this. So what I'm saying here is that the ethics of artificial consciousness is very quickly gaining prominence. And the academic research community now has a big problem. It has to intervene in public debates under normative and empirical uncertainty. We don't know what it is, and we don't know what class of systems would be conscious. However, the most immediate risk is what I have termed social hallucinations. And I guess you're all aware of this. It might be that we get a lot of false positives in the general population, that millions of people believe their best friend, their chatbot is actually conscious. I get emails every single day by alarmed people who have entered long philosophical discussions with a bot and are now convinced it has an internal perspective. So there could be a widespread public misperception that those postbiotic systems are already conscious, while all the experts, philosophers or neuroscientists or computer scientists say, no, 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 that system has no phenomenal states. This could get out of hand, right? So we should impose a 25-year moratorium on all research in Europe that knowingly risks or directly aims at artificial consciousness. I think we should strategically resource allocate to European consciousness research. And here's a very simple and very concrete proposal. One could prohibit large language models from using the first-person pronoun I. And this would be something that could be implemented in a very fast way in Europe, so that they refer to themselves only as this model and this system, and don't trigger this intersubjectivity illusion on the linguistic level. Third and last point, I think we have to determine the maximum payable price. And let me quickly explain what I mean by this. First, a recommendation. The German National Academy for the Government, two groups of experts have published two statements. You all know that there is a serious mental health crisis now in 14 to 20-year-old children and youth. This is a pandemic, it's very serious, and these two statements are now available in English. It's a recommendation to the German government, which it ignores, but which is very interesting, actually. Maybe you find that interesting. So, our children are under attack from Chinese AI, like TikTok from ByteDance, but on the other side, you all know the American tech industry has lost its dignity for decades by going down on their knees and kissing the ring. And I think we should actually not underestimate this. They are in an incentive landscape that causes a race to the bottom. It's not that smart people don't see the issues, but they are in this breakneck competitive society, and they have to go race, they have to go down with safety regulations. So I think we have to be very realistic. We are under attack. This is an emergency. We are technologically inferior. I think by financial power, we are also inferior in Europe. To achieve digital sovereignty will take years because everything's on cloud servers in the US and so forth. And the hostile actors are caught in a race to the bottom. They cannot liberate themselves. So the question rather now is what is the most intelligent form of damage control for Europe? I think that's the rational question to ask. And I think we should look at when appeasement is irrational. So if the cost of the concession is higher than the cost of conflict, then appeasement becomes irrational. There are long-term costs also to keep on appeasing, say, the Californian tech industry. This may encourage repeated and escalating demands from the aggressors at some point. And the question I'm putting to you is, how do you estimate, how do you see this opponent type? From a game theoretic perspective, the question is the aggressor an insatiable challenger whose ultimate goal is complete defeat of the appeaser? Putin, for instance, is an example of an insatiable opponent who will not stop. If the tech industry, if you judge the tech industry in California to be of the same type of opponent, appeasement is irrational. Now, if we want to stage some form of resistance or do a rational form of disaster risk reduction, the first step one has to do is to determine the maximum payable price for Europe for resistance. This does not have to happen in public. And the second step is one has to determine the willingness to pay. That is the maximum amount any individual nation and the population is actually willing to pay for active resistance and prevention. And that, of course, has to be done in public discourse. And I think that would be step one, to be very honest to ourselves, what's the maximum price we can actually pay to stand up against this in an inferior position. So I had 3 positive proposals. We need more robust meta-governance to close the pacing gap. We have to allocate resources to consciousness research about this problem of artificial consciousness. And in the face of hostile actors, I think we have to define the maximum payable price. Thank you very much.
Now, I do not pose a question because we are lagging behind the time, so I want to save the half an hour for the audience for exchange. I already have seen 2 questions, and please, if you put your paper up, I can then more easily see who are keen on the talking. So we start from the lady here, then a colleague from there, the back row lady, and then the 4th one, and then I take a next round after. So the panelists, please have your pens or digital tools ready to take notes. Please, and introduce, I can't see all the names, and don't maybe remember them by heart.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for a wonderful panel. I'm Shami Chakrabarti. I'm from the UK PACE delegation. Thanks to all the speakers, and I particularly enjoyed the call to arms from our final distinguished speaker. I'm wondering what useful analogies in the regulation, in earlier models of regulation we might look to. And I was thinking about, for example, pharmaceuticals. They are a global phenomenon. They are often marketized by global, very powerful, not always completely altruistic, but occasionally notionally altruistic players. We have already, and regulation is imperfect, inevitably, but we have both global and local regulation of this advanced technology, which of course is capable of doing very good things for humanity, but also capable of doing a great deal of damage as well. And that is understood by pretty much everyone, whether they prefer a lighter touch or more intrusive regulation. Some products that are controlled are subject to prior approval. Each product is supposed to be subject to prior approval, which means that some products are banned. Some products are banned for certain uses or in certain hands, and others are subject to licensing. Now, of course, this is imperfect regulation, and there are gangsters at the local and global level, as well as arguably more responsible providers. But I wonder whether there is something there, and if not, in that analogy, in which other analogies from the history of regulating new technologies.
I take all the four, so then you answers. Please, Titus.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to thank the keynote speakers for their extremely valuable contributions. I'm Senator Titus Corlățean from Romania, a member of the Legal Affairs Committee. I want to raise a legal issue, apparently, but with possible serious political consequences, and I take the benefit of the presence of, in the same room, of both our current President of the Assembly and also the incoming President of the Assembly. And I want to update an issue that I already raised, some of the colleagues might remember, last year during our debates within the Parliamentary Assembly. It was related to a decision that was taken by the Council of Europe member states, which are also members of the European Union, based on a meeting in Brussels through COREPER, that means the Council, to grant the right of a unique signature to the European Commission on behalf of all EU member states which are members of the Council of Europe, based on the Lisbon Treaty legal personality that was achieved. I was critical at the time because from the beginning I have mentioned the fact that our convention, framework convention, that means the Council of Europe Convention, is not limited or is not related mainly to the internal market or some other topics which are part of the domain of competence of the Commission within EU. Our instrument is related mainly to how to defend human dignity, fundamental human rights, democracy against the abusive right of the artificial intelligence, which is different. So, no signature until now, because you have been mentioning the issue of signatures, ratification, and proper implementation of the convention. No signature on behalf of the EU member states, which are members of the Council of Europe, waiting to finalize the internal EU procedure for the so-called ratification. As far as I know, after 27 of January, this instrument will be sent to the European Parliament, that most probably will adopt a positive opinion, and that this will be sent to the Council once again, that will ratify this instrument. What instrument? It's not a convention. It's an EU Act on artificial intelligence, which is slightly different. That means strategies, guidelines, proposals for future EU legislation. Based on that ratification, EU might propose next year a package of EU legislation, most probably regulations. And those member states of both EU and Council of Europe will implement those regulations, EU regulations, that will have a much more limited scope comparing to what is the content of our framework convention. So we have a problem because in the end, if we follow specifically this procedure, we'll have two different regimes. A broader regime that will be implemented by the non-EU member states, which are members of the Council of Europe, and they will ratify on one hand, and the EU member states, which will focus on a less limited, let's say, relevant domain from our point of view on the human dignity protection. So my appeal is the following one, and I raise it once again. I was quite critical with my government. I'm supporting my government, but I was critical because the governments accepted this rationale. And my proposal is very simple. We should not accept what we are calling in our academic life the fragmentation of the international law. We still have the Vienna Convention on the law of the treaties. We still have our national legislation. According to my national legislation in Romania, law of the treaties, I cannot ratify something which is the signature of the European Commission. Of course, I implement the EU regulation through a different mechanism. So in the end, I will put in place something which is more restricted on the content than our convention. So my appeal is good lawyers can find, and we have solutions according to the international law, to allow also the signatures of the member states complementary to the one signature of the European Commission. Definitely this will not contradict the engagement within EU, but will enlarge, according to the scope of the Framework Convention, the possibility of ratification and proper implementation. It's a very serious subject, and I will ask maybe the political leaders, the Bureau of the Assembly, definitely the Committee of Ministers to relaunch this reflection and to allow the proper implementation of the Framework Convention. Otherwise, this precious work will be partially lost. Thank you.
Thank you. Lady.
Thank you. My name is Francesca Fanucci. I'm from the European Centre for Non-Profit Law and representing the European Digital Rights Alliance, EDRI. I have two questions, one for Mario, I believe, and one for Lord Murray. The first question regards, again, the Convention on AI. We know that most of the provisions of the conventions are essentially broad principles which establish, obviously, the principles around which AI should be designed, developed, and deployed, but they leave the states ample margin of discretion on whether to use existing rules or adopt new rules to abide by these principles. So my question is, which challenges do you see, when this convention is ratified, which challenges, if any, do you expect on practical implementations, and how would you suggest that the states tackle them? And the question to Lord Murray is connected because the UK has signed the convention and I expect will be ratifying it soon. But the convention has got significant gaps, one of which is doesn't only exempt the military sector as discussed before, but it also does not cover national security. So in the context of your inquiry into AI regulation, and how it should be regulated, if it should be regulated and how, have you considered, or are you going to cover the issue of AI tools designed and developed for national security, not only those designed and deployed in the military sector? Thank you.
Thank you. And the last speaker for this round, please.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm Vladimir Vartanyan. I'm from Parliament of Armenia and member of the Armenian delegation in PACE. I have a question concerning the AI sovereignty, if I'm allowed. And many speakers raised the question about that, you know, ombuds institution or ombudsperson should be engaged in the checking information on ChatGPT and so on from the perspective of ethics of AI and so on. The problem is following. Okay, we are living in a small country, which is too far from US, okay, we, as a parliament, may give the right to ombudsperson or other institution to follow the developments of ChatGPT and other relevant machine learning systems. But what should be further steps? How to reach them? Just for your information, if we find something on Facebook which is contradicting to our law, it is quite complicated to reach Facebook. And if you reach Facebook, it's very complicated to convince them that this information should be removed, because actually Facebook is operating, even not under the federal US legislations, acting under California state legislation mostly. So the question is the following: how to reach AI sovereignty in the general sovereignty in cyberspace, take into account this issue. If you are a small country, actually too far from United States, and you have no tools for going ahead with them. And the very small question, what to do with the university learning? Because as far as I understand, we should come back to the oral exams, because this is the only option to understand what are the real depth of knowledge of students. Otherwise, okay, give me just 2 hours and I will prepare you a PhD paper on chemistry if I have access to ChatGPT. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be done. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the questions, very much to the point. I will suggest to have a one round, and not everybody to answer everything, but it was quite clear for you to make the distinction, AI Act and the procedure on the Framework Convention, and Joanna wanted to have the parts earlier. So should we start from that end? If we start with the Professor Metzinger, do you want to have a comment on one or another?
No comment from my side.
Okay. Thank you for saving the time. Petri?
Just a short one about national security. When we talk about migration, we all know that often in European countries, when the countries are trying to limit or somehow manage the migration and the possible routes for migrants to enter countries and seek asylum or something else, often it is argumented that for the national security reasons we have to somehow limit it. And what comes to AI, it is clear that national security as an argument is seen and will be seen when we talk about the migration management. And this is a very good question. I don't have a very good answer to it, but for us as politicians, this is something that we should also cover and also create these kind of standards and guidelines when it is clear that the question is about national security and when it's not. Often it's not from my perspective, but it should be clear.
Thank you. Mr. Ram?
Thank you very much for the questions. This issue regarding ratification and signature of European Union countries and the relationship with an international treaty is one of those problems that I'm pretty sure United Kingdom is very happy to get rid of. And that's one of the reasons they are out of the European Union, because it indeed it's a legal and an institutional problems that is still going on. It's under construction, if I may, to use that sentence. Of course, it has legal consequences. Whether the European Union ratifies exclusively the Framework Convention or the national or the states ratifies along with the European Union. If the European Union ratifies exclusively the convention, the Framework Convention for the 27 member states becomes European Union legislation, which is different from the legal status of an international treaty. But if states ratifies, the Framework Convention becomes an international treaty. and then applies the Vienna Convention of International Treaties if the state has ratified it. Sorry for being this technical. I'm a lawyer and I cannot help myself of doing this. But that's the real problem. And now the procedure of the European Union ratification is still going on. There is, in the European Union Parliament, 3 committees are discussing this issue, and they will deliver a report in the late of December, or maybe in the beginning of, or the late of January, depends on the works. So I will suggest to finish for these reports, to see what European Union Parliament says. And then those reports go to the plenary, and then the Parliament will say something, and they will go to the Council. And there, the executives will have the last word. So if there is countries with a strong position regarding, I have my own one, but if states have strong positions, they have to show them, because we have been discussing about this issue for 3 years already. So that is the thing. And the other question is about, not regarding the European Union member steps, if state ratifies the Framework Convention, what is next? Well, I will say that it depends on the state, of course. Legislating by principles is very useful when you have very different perspectives, legal perspectives, because you will give and you allow national perspectives and folklorical problems to be reached in the personal way of taking care of. So the main challenge for me, and sorry for taking this too long, is to design a legal strategy, a legislative strategy, a national legislative strategy, because it depends on the interest that every single state has on artificial intelligence. Maybe there is a problem with immigration, there is a problem with children, there is a problem with... So it depends on the country, and that's the thing, because artificial intelligence is a cross-cutting technology, so there is not only one single answer. There is not an answer that fits all. And regarding the AI sovereignty, that's the point. From my point of view, it should be an European problem, not a national problem, because, I mean, we are dealing with big actors in the world, not only states, but big companies. So we need to sum up efforts. And the European Union has a strategic document about digital sovereignty that relates with energy, technology, infrastructures, and quantum computing. So, and it takes like decades to get to this digital sovereignty. So you have a lot of work to do, parliamentarians, about these problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to add that the latest one, that it caused a lot of discussion maybe in many countries, that suddenly Microsoft was closing an account's calendar and emails of the judge. And that really was a shock when you look your own national public infrastructure. That might be the very same, well-known, well-functioning, often the cheapest, covers everything. So that has now taken a part on the debate. So just add it to your list also, the programs. Then the next, please, Murray.
Thank you very much. Just, I thought I'd start with Baroness Chakrabarty's question about whether there's a useful analogy in relation to pharmaceuticals and the fact that that would necessitate the need for local regulation in each country and global regulation. And it's an attractive analogy, although I think unfortunately it founders slightly on the intangible and immediate nature of AI software development, and in particular the pacing gap that was identified by Dr. Metzinger in his remarks, because unfortunately regulation takes time to enact, and it's leaden in its response, and the difficulty is that a lot of this software is produced, as our friend from Armenia highlighted, in California and is subject to the laws of California on its production, and then is used directly in other parts of the world. And so it is possible that global and local regulation will be a slow and somewhat cumbersome method for regulating AI, but the answer is we don't really have much other option. So that I think is at least part of an answer to the question that Baroness Chakrabarty posed. Turning to our friend from Euro Law, as I understand it, the treaty, the Framework Convention will come into force when 5 signatory nations have ratified the convention, but no parties so far have ratified it. I don't really understand, I don't have a feel for when those magical 5 ratifications will occur. And obviously, when it does, there will need to be some sort of thought given to what direct legislative response there are, both on the European plane, for those who, and on the Council of Europe plane, in relation to the impact of those conventions. And then to the second part of your question, in relation to whether our JCHR report will look at national security, clearly we're looking more generally across human rights and the regulation of artificial intelligence. And we will touch on, I'm sure, the use of facial recognition and on other aspects of AI. Well, obviously, those matters in relation to national security are already fairly closely regulated. There's a lot of legislation here about when facial recognition can be used by police forces investigating ordinary crimes and national security offences, and similarly in relation to the interception of communications. That's something that also will be impacted by AI, and it's something I imagine the committee will touch on. Plainly, of course, though, national security is a pressing political concern, and perhaps a different approach is taken to the use of AI in those fields by agents of the state. But you never, you have to keep a careful eye on the human rights implications of that. I hope that therefore addresses the questions that were put to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
All right, thank you. I'm going to focus on just the first and the fourth. And actually, the way I answer the first, I think we'll come back to answering the fourth, and that's great because it will come back again to these large companies thing. But I do want to start with highlighting not only did we see the both Microsoft and Amazon cutting off people from ICC in different ways, but also we saw the American-sourced weapons that Ukraine had that were in Russia apparently just stopped working, and that's why Ukraine lost access to Kurtz, which was something they had been counting on for their negotiations. And so this is why everyone is worried about digital sovereignty. I attended not only the public Franco-German meeting on digital sovereignty that was a couple weeks ago, but also a Chatham Rule meeting earlier where somebody said, look, digital sovereignty means other people cannot accidentally or by intent turn off our stuff, right? So I think that's a pretty straightforward definition, although as has been highlighted, it's not simple to solve. And one of our great concerns is, of course, the nuclear, the supposedly independent nuclear deterrent of Great Britain, that whether or not it's really independent. I hope so. All right, so coming back to this answer, I think pharmaceutical is a very nice model. And although I take into account what you just said, I do want us to remember there's more different kinds of things like this. In particular, I think the solution that we're going to have to come up with on these problems is going to have to be transnational regulation of what are essentially transnational utilities. So part of competition law has always been that there are some things that just are at scale. And the markets are never going, they do better, they naturally scale, natural monopolies. And one of the things that conventional artificial intelligence does is solve logistics challenges, so basically anything can become a natural monopoly. So this is a problem we have to solve not only in this domain, but more widely. So I believe if we're going to have basically, I should back up a little. No one is talking about utility since about 1980. No one is what you're supposed to do is identify a new utility and then say, oh, it's a utility. That means the market can't regulate it, so the government has to step in and regulate harder to come up with prices, even if we have to kind of guess some. No, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. You're not supposed to take pictures in Parliament. Anyway, right, so I think what we have to do is we have to come up with transnational treaties to help us regulate these transnational entities. And I think the EU is a good model of how we can do harmonizing, but it's not sufficient. We need to have agile networks of countries currently supporting the rule of law. And so I think there's some discussion about this in the context of possible alternatives to the World Trade Organization, that we come up with something that's a little bit more decentralized and agile. And I think that might be the right place to work on these kinds of treaties. You asked for another analogy. I would just talk about more generally in the US in the early 20th century, the fact that basically after one world war and one financial crash, there was enough entropy that we got enough of the elite to sign up with the proletariat, and we got the New Deal, and we started doing redistribution. Remember, a lot of the things that we're seeing now that are being blamed on AI, we also saw at that period. High inequality creates volatility. It means individuals are able to act without the constraints of governments, and that's a problem. So we've been in this situation before, and we saw the same kinds of problems with high churn and the C-suites and all these other kinds of things that people are now blaming on social media. So anyway, I think we need to be negotiating with these companies and try to get enough of them to say, yes, it is in our interest to be well-governed. And this deals with that race to the bottom thing that was described as inevitable. It is not inevitable, right? That's when we are well-governed, then we don't have this race to the bottom, and we see sectors cooperating with governments to help construct regulation and to keep the race from the bottom from happening. So it's unfortunate that U.S. West Coast is so libertarian they don't believe in this capacity. I realize I'm taking a little too much time, so maybe I shouldn't go into this, but nobody asked this question, but nobody asked me if I wanted to ask a question. Do we want to hear about consciousness? So as an alternative, as somebody who's attended a lot of consciousness meetings lately too, an alternative view is that AI already is as conscious as it has hands and feet. If you're willing to call these ridiculous grippers, which are nothing like a human hand, a hand, or feet that you walk on as feet, then you may as well talk about the explicit memory and the capacity to learn and things like that we already see. We shouldn't mystify consciousness. And if you're worried about things phenomenologically, again, yes, we should absolutely be looking at the systems and making sure that they're not degrading in ways that are damaging, because if nothing else, they're useful, expensive systems we've built, and we don't want to see the waste of resources. But if you're worried about it phenomenologically, I think I can't tell you exactly when that suffering starts to matter in some sense, but I can tell you it's phenomenologically a lot more distant from us than pigs and cows and rats and even fruit flies. So until we've figured out animal welfare, I don't think that we need to worry as much about AI consciousness, and we've been debating this for a long time. Thank you.
Interesting. I do have two short questions from the chairs of the EPP group and GUE. So Pablo and Laura, please.
Very short to speak about how this is going to affect the relationship with the United States. You have mentioned we are not in the extreme short period of time, in the medium term. We are destined to crash in AI, or because the different interests that we are defending, or there is a possibility of compromise. Not in the short time, in the short period, because Europe is in the middle of a war with Russia. We need United States, and AI is the most important issue of our times. So let's think about if it's a possibility of compromise or not. Thank you.
And Laura?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just very, very straight and short questions. The first is about data. We see that the data is a problem, and it's a problem, the monopoly of data by the company. So what do you think about laws against this monopoly of data? And the second question is about algorithms. What do you think about a creation of international organisms in charge of regulate this algorithm? And also maybe even think about or debate of data and algorithm as public goods. Because now there is a private thing and there's merchandising and it's a bargain on this. So maybe we should think about public goods. And the last question is about, we see and we are talking about artificial intelligence as a threat. Could be used this artificial intelligence as a weapon to fight against this bad artificial intelligence? And in this approach of public goods. That is my 3 questions. Thank you. Well, 4.
Thank you. As only a vice chair for the Parliamentary Assembly, I didn't dare to not to give the floor for the group leaders. But I ask the colleagues here on the podium to think because one of the questions, what Laura has said, it's the 3rd session, parliamentary oversight, policy and legislative approach, also for the algorithm. But if you allow, I also want to maybe share one view. I was vice chair for the relation to the United States and doing a digital. So on the Mr. Hispan's questions, it depends who you talk with in the USA. There is a USA of big tech. There is USA of federal level, and then there is like USA also worried about market integration, billionaires establishing think tanks and trying to finance some alternatives. So also internally, United Nations is not so unified because of course they are worried that they can't create business on the data when data power is in the hands of you, who are now illegally, according to our own legislation, Digital Sovereignty Service Act and Market Act, using the illegal ways of our data. Then can we punish it? Yes, Commissioner Virkkunen is trying and putting the pills, so did the Vestager. The pills were like millions and billions, but only still a small share. So I personally took part in some initiatives that tried to challenge from inside also the US market concentrations, even the people's bid on TikTok, that if you could buy away, improve the algorithms that Laura was referring to, so could that happen? Then now we see that not much has happened, even the European legislation on the competitiveness didn't change that much. So I don't know if the new term in the European Union will find more strict solutions, or is the way what was talked here the sovereignty and new innovations. So one way is that at least should we use the most core infrastructure, the most sensitive data, the public data that is most sensitive, that we have to and want to open for the markets, but still look it from the security perspective and maybe having even dual systems. Then it comes to the question of payment, but are we risking then losing some very core, what it complies with the data and cloud and everything. So there are exception possibilities for what I in general in favor of opening all the data for everything. And I loved very much for the Baroness on the example, because I hated the old example of data being the new oil or something very stupid, because it was like once you burn the oil, it's very hard to put it back or use it several times, and that's causing troubles, but then also making the cars move, but not that much as the AI can do. So that was actually what I was using with the lobbyists who were not so willing to see the legislation on AI, that we all trust going to pharmacy and not to sign a contents that I will swallow this bill. and put your name on the consent form first. We don't think of that, and we are happy of the regulation that gives us the certain trust on the medicines that we are using. So just add that to yours, and I will add your examples to mine. So Joanna wanted to answer the chairs. Anyone else? You. And you may have the final word.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then Joanna.
Okay. Quickly, I slightly misunderstood, but I think it's worth bringing up. When you said crash, not clash, I do think that there's going to be a crash in the valuations of the generative AI companies. It won't be permanent, so they'll build back, but I am worried about a 2008-style liquidity crisis, because I think basically the US has been propping that up. If you look at the rest of their stock market, it's been going down. And so we all know that the finance doesn't do well when the US stock market goes down. So also I heard, again, at another Chatham Rule meeting last week, that the people are worried that Trump is going to deliberately devalue the dollar in favor of cryptocurrency. So people should just be braced for another 2008-style liquidity crisis. But yeah, that was... but the other thing is, I totally agree with what you're saying about public goods, but my point about utilities is that they are public goods. And that's why we need to co-regulate these transnational public goods. However, I wouldn't concentrate too much power in any one place, because then that becomes contested and it becomes regulatory capture happens. So I very much like these sort of decentralized anarchy of states that are harmonized somehow, that we're striking some pretty cool balances there. Thanks.
Maria?
One slogan. There's only one way to fight back artificial intelligence abuses. It is using artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence has overwhelmed human capacity. So we need to use artificial intelligence to fight back artificial intelligence.
And
yes.
I promised the final word.
Thank you. Just on the question put by the chair of the EPP group, how would AI regulation impact on our relationship with the United States? I think it will need very careful handling, and already we found in our relation to our own regulations, the Online Safety Act is unpopular in Washington, and I understand that even today parts of our trade deal have been suspended. I don't know whether that is as a consequence of regulation in the UK or not, but so certainly I think it's something we will all have to tread carefully in relation to.
Thank you so much. I kept the notes that I could do the summary, but I'm seeing so interesting faces that I noticed everyone was really following and swallowing it all and having food for thought. So I will not wrap up with repeating what the honest panelists were telling us. Very concrete, very deep to the point, and I'm very happy that I've been able to modify this one. Now I was informed to ask you to take the stand outside the door, so you will be guided to the lunch. So thank you very much. It was an honor to moderate this panel. Thank you.